concept of a passkey is the passkey lives on your device. So let's say you had a really hypersensitive app that you did not want other people to access. For some people, that would maybe be something adult related. For others, it might be financial. So that password lives on your device, and that's how it authenticates. If you die in a plane crash, or if a car crash, there's an explosion, and that device is destroyed, your loved ones, not only do they not have a way to get into your account, they don't even know the account exists unless they go into your email. But still, my point here is there's a lot of these flaws in our current technology for how to best pass down this data.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of Death and Dying in the Digital Age, where we explore what it means to manage your digital legacy. Now, I'm here with David Cox. David, I met you a few months back when I was searching for how to manage digital legacies on our phones. And
That's
you
right.
popped up as a huge influencer on YouTube. So talk a little bit about what was it that got you into this space. I also want to say
Yeah.
that David, you are one of the few people that I've spoken to that actually has your legacy plan buttoned up in such a way.
I
It's
actually got it right. Woo-hoo. Celebrate, little celebrations, right? Well, so thank you, Niki, for having me on your show. So, I've had a YouTube channel for 15 years, and we have this thing called YouTube Analytics. So I know that about roughly 80% of my audience is over the age of 50. And so a lot of times, as we get older, we have to deal with death more and more. And it's one of these things where it's like if someone died, 40 years ago, it was totally different from how it is now, because now you've got this digital life. And if you don't have a plan, it makes it so much more painful. So what I like to do is I like to kind of help give people like a guide for how to deal with this stuff. Because the thing with technology is it's constantly evolving. I would argue it at a very annoying pace. It's very, very difficult to keep up with. It's hard for me to keep up with. And I'm a tech guy. And, I think about my clients who are in mostly their 60s and 70s, and it's just completely overwhelming. So my gift, I guess you could say, has always been to be able to talk tech to the non-tech savvy and just help make it make sense, and just give me a game plan for how to get where I need to be. So shall we launch into it, Niki, for what people really need to do?
Really need to do. And I also do want to emphasize, we're going to start talking about technology, but your specialty really is with Apple products and not I'm an Android user, right? So we can't talk about how to safeguard my Android and passwords and stuff.
Well, thankfully, Google does have their own ecosystem and they have their own tools to do that stuff. But yes, just to be completely clear, 100% of my videos are all pretty much Apple related. A lot of the tools I teach are available on multiple platforms, but yeah, it's pretty much all Apple centric.
So let's talk about legacy contacts on the functionality of legacy contacts on the Apple phone. I have to say that when I am introducing or meeting people and talking to them about what I'm doing as a digital thanatologist, they really don't understand until I start talking about their phone.
Yeah.
And then they have that, oh no moment. And it is just crystal clear of, hey, you died tomorrow and your phone died with you. Think about multi-factor authentication. And then it allows me to take that step and literally, because of your video, step by step, walk them through what it means to set up a legacy contact. Now, talk a little bit about Apple and what motivated them to create. A lot of people don't know about the legacy contacts on Apple. So what have they been doing to promote?
So one thing I will say, I do not work for Apple. I don't have a contract with Apple. And I think that makes me a great resource because I can call them on their shit. And there are plenty of areas where Apple and I severely disagree with how to handle an issue. Legacy contact is part of it. So basically, Apple came to this conversation probably about 5 years too late. But it was like, oh, finally, they've got something to help deal with this situation because, like you said, if you don't have your stuff in order and you die and no one knows the passcode to your phone, how are they going to get into your stuff, right? This stuff is all encrypted. So what they did was they created this kind of backdoor for getting into your stuff, and then it's through a feature called a legacy contact. The process to access this feature is pretty much the same on every Apple device now, which I'll give them credit for that. I will give them credit for that. So if you're following along at home and you want to get to this feature, here's the way you do it. So if you're on a Mac, you go to settings. If you're on your phone, you just go into the settings app and then you tap on your name at the top. The second item down is sign in and security. Scroll down to the bottom of that next menu and it's right there, legacy contact. You can have up to 5. And what this basically does is it just means that for all of the most important information, especially your photos, messages, files that were on like the desktop, the documents folder, iCloud Drive, all of that stuff, it creates a path for it to be passed down to your loved ones. Because the thing is that we're all just kind of leasing in this digital world, right? It's no one's got permanent residency. So do you have to take the action now? Because without it, you need a court order to get into that data. But here's the thing, it's not perfect. And this is where I'm going to call them out. What Apple should have done, in my professional opinion, is they should have given an option for passwords to be included with this data. They did not. I don't understand why. So what it does is it puts all of that on the living and the person who's, about to die or just did die, to have already had some sort of an arrangement to pass on that data. So I've got some disagreements with them about how they handle that situation. And then it actually gets a little bit more complicated, Niki. So Niki, have you heard of this feature called pass keys?
Again, I'm not an Apple user, so for those that are.
Okay, okay, that's fine. No is an acceptable answer. So passkeys is this feature where you can basically have a password saved. By the way, passkeys are available on Android.
So the
They are.
passkeys
Passkey
for our
technology is
less,
available on all devices. So
so for our
basically,
less
the
technology,
concept of
yep.
a passkey is the passkey lives on your device. So let's say you had a really hypersensitive app that you did not want other people to access. For some people, that would maybe be something adult related. For others, it might be financial. So that password lives on your device, and that's how it authenticates. If you die in a plane crash, or if a car crash, there's an explosion, and that device is destroyed, your loved ones, not only do they not have a way to get into your account, they don't even know the account exists unless they go into your email. But still, my point here is there's a lot of these flaws in our current technology for how to best pass down this data. I feel like we should have a conversation more about like what is the best way to pass on this information so that it
You
is
know,
clean.
and I said, the recipe I would love our conversation to really build out is, hey, I get a 6-month diagnosis. I know
Yeah,
I'm on my way out.
right,
What can I do to safeguard and protect my digital legacy to not have that mayhem for my family when I'm
right,
gone?
right. So regardless of wherever you store your passwords, whether it's in apps like 1Password or LastPass, or you use Keychain, which is now kind of the passwords app on the Mac, wherever it is, there's pretty much always an option to do a file export all, and it exports it as a type of file known as a CSV file, comma separated values. It's the type of document that would be read by something like a spreadsheet piece of software like Numbers or Excel. So my advice is to the young people or whoever is inheriting that data, it is critical that you understand what is the best way to manage that data. Because the problem is if you don't, you can have a problem where their passwords and your passwords kind of become this intertwined mess. And so now you go to a website and there's like 50 different logins, all, it's maybe your couple plus, if you're inheriting mom and dad's, let's face it, they probably had a few duplicate passwords. So all of that is now just kind of, and you just can't, it's unmanageable. So here's the trick, okay? Whether you're a Windows user, whether you're a Mac user, if you get your parents' CSV file of your passwords, The trick is to create a new user on your computer that is dedicated to dealing with their affairs. Then you import that file so that when you're logged into that user account, it only submits mom or dad's passwords, not yours. And so that gives you the ability to much more easily log in to them and deal with their affairs, whether it's closeout accounts. You'll, of course, have to have a death certificate handy because there's going to be certain instances where that's going to need to be provided. But again, it's just nice because it gives them their little space to deal with their affairs, but it doesn't cross over into yours. Does that make sense?
I mean, it is a step-by-step process that for someone who is not tech savvy to understand how to be navigating those spreadsheets. Are there professionals out there that can, or platforms that can do a better job? I know that there's one like Delete Me, for example.
Yeah, so sites like Delete Me are interesting. I did a little bit of research on them prior to this conversation because I know you had kind of privately we talked a little bit about this. You'd asked me like, David, what do you think about this stuff? And so I want to share with everyone what my process was to come up with this answer. So I went to Delete Me's website and I pulled up. They have two different sort of privacy policy type things at the bottom of their website, and what I did was I copied all of that information and I fed it into ChatGPT. And I said, I want you to analyze this information and tell me if you find anything suspicious. So here's what it came up with. All right. And I asked it to write it as me. So I'm just going to be reading this next part, but at least I own up to it, right? Honestly, I have some serious concerns about services like Delete Me, especially given how they position themselves as champions of privacy. At a first glance, they seem like a great option. They help you opt out of data brokers and claim to reduce your exposure online. But when you look more closely at their operations, it raises questions about whether they truly live up to their mission or if they're just yet another service profiting from privacy fears that they're supposedly there to solve. For starters, while Delete Me works to remove your data from data brokers, their own website integrates heavily with platforms like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Taboola, which are all companies that are notorious for collecting and monetizing users' data. They
Wow.
use tools like Google Analytics, Facebook Pixel, and even LinkedIn ads to track users' behavior, optimize marketing, and serve targeted ads. For a company that's supposed to be prioritizing your privacy, relying on these tracking heavy tools just kind of feels a little bit hypocritical. I mean, how can a service that's dedicated to protecting your data simultaneously be working with platforms that are major players in the data collection industry? And then it gets actually even better. When you sign up for those services, you are giving them a limited power of attorney, and that's what they require you to grant them. And this gives the ability to act on your behalf to remove your data. Like, and that can include creating accounts, signing documents, and more. And while that is technically necessary for their service to function, it's a significant level of trust to place in a company, especially one that integrates with so many so many third-party services themselves. If there's a breach or a misuse of this authority, the fallout could be horrible. And then speaking of third-party services, they use tools like Amazon S3 for storage, HubSpot for marketing, Zendesk for their customer service. And while these are kind of standard business tools, they do introduce all of these extra potential vulnerabilities. And it's just, I think it's I'm not going to read the rest of what ChatGPT analyzed, but it's like this is the problem I have with a lot of these security services is that they're peddling these fears, but in the process, they're also guilty of a lot of what they're claiming to prevent. And one of the interesting details that I did come across is that there's nothing that says they submit this information to have your info removed. They could delete it and then just re-add it. You'd never know about it. I mean, there's nothing that's stopping all of these companies. There's not a lot of regulation these days in terms of this stuff.
I mean, we are the wild, wild west, right? I mean, we're not the European Union that has the GDPR that is very strict. I mean, some state, California, Colorado, maybe Virginia, but even still, we're fragmented from a US standpoint on how we're dealing with data privacy. And yet, basically everything you shared, it's like, well, then as a user, what are my options? If again, we're down to because everything you just said is like my mind is just like, where is
It's a lot.
Just made me more confused, more, again, for that average user.
Right.
And yet I'm dealing with a terminal diagnosis at the moment.
Right.
Not me personally, but I'm saying, like, if that scenario is like, I don't have time to think about what these organizations and companies, who owns my data, who doesn't. I get it, it's a commodity. I just want to I don't want my family to have to deal with zombie accounts,
Right.
right? Or be at risk for identity theft and for my accounts to be broken into. So
So that is
how?
why it is so critical that in addition to creating a legacy contact and giving your loved ones access to that CSV file that I was talking about earlier, it is also critical that whoever is your executor needs to have the passcode to get into your devices. It's a critical layer to just get access to that information. And Niki, I hate to say this, but one of the lines that I just find myself saying all the time, especially with my clients, is that security is an emotion. And it's true.
Have
There's not a heck of a lot that any of us can really do in this day and age. Everything's digital, it's out there. Yeah, you can send a request to remove my data. Are they going to actually do it? Maybe you'll just get more. For people out there who get like bombed with email, I mean, I'm one of them at this point. I've got a super simple little trick. And if they go to my little YouTube channel, basically what you do is you create a thing so that your email searches for the word unsubscribe. Just to be clear, we're not clicking buttons, but usually if you just target that word in the emails, you can usually identify most of the junk.
Interesting. I mean, and now more and more companies are like, the way they're placing the words unsubscribe,
Yeah.
it's
Or it's
very
like it's a
covert.
white font on a white background. Of course, there are ways they can get around this. They can just change it so that instead of saying unsubscribe, it says manage subscription
Managed,
preferences, which is
right.
a different word. So this is the thing. It's like you've got to, usually when I'm having chats with my clients about privacy and security and this stuff, I kind of describe it as like a seesaw. On one side, you've got convenience, and on the other side, you've got security. And for most people, it's about trying to find that good balance between
Balance.
the two because you can drive yourself absolutely nutty with this stuff if you go crazy on the security side. But on the other side, if you go the name of your dog, number one, your risk of certain things really, really goes through the roof. So when we're talking about the websites that people need to really focus on in terms of, because you get into this password list and it can be just absolutely overwhelming.
Because it's every password of every, sign up here, because that's what they were always looking for, and they're still
Right.
looking for, right? Was they
Right.
want to be able just, and that is it, my email address has become a commodity.
Yeah.
And so then what I did was I started creating more email addresses. And so now I have to manage a
All
dozen
of that
email addresses.
stuff. Right.
Well, like you said, it is trying. I love the seesaw analogy because it really does feel, how do I make that balance between securing myself, giving access though, right? I mean, my Amazon account, we want to save a few dollars. So I'm going to include some of my family members, but by including some of my family members opens me up to,
More
other
risk. Yeah,
and more
exactly.
risk, right? So then the question is, again, moving forward, and am I right to say that the way we're managing passwords today is going to look very different in the next 3 to 5 years? 6
Well,
months? I mean, with AI?
it's really hard to know because, pass keys is this like, it's the new thing. It's what everyone's talking about. But I feel like people have not thought this all the way through. Thankfully, a lot of people who are using pass keys currently also have a password for that. So one of the tricks I like to give to the Apple users out there is if you use the password app and you hit command 2, that shows you all of the pass keys that are stored in the Mac. So what you can do is just verify that for every pass key, there is also a password that's there. Because remember, if that device is destroyed, or if your loved ones can't get into that device, there's no way to manage the account. So again, that seesaw. It's, if you go too crazy on the security side, it can create an issue for your loved ones.
They won't be
It's
able to get
it's
in.
maddening.
It's oh,
Just at least know this. At least if you're watching at home and you're thinking to yourself, "This is maddening," let me just tell you, you're right. It is. It's insane. It's an insane world that we live in, and it's really hard when you consider that we've got young people who've been using the stuff since they were born, and we've got older people who this is very, very foreign to them. And a lot of times, the young people are better at managing some of this stuff than the older people. And so it's just, there's no great system, but the key is to be proactive about it. And like I said, exporting that password, that CSV file that we were talking about is critical. And obviously make sure that the information that's in it is correct. And also, I should probably mention it's probably not the best idea to keep a file called passwords on your computer. That would be a very bad idea.
well, again, I guess the good news here is that the craziness, the insanity I'm feeling
Yeah.
is real.
Validated. It's
It's yeah.
validated.
I mean, if anything, that's what this conversation has done
Yeah.
is like, okay, it's kind of like climate change. Like we're in a digital climate change right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it feels like.
Let me give you another one, Nikki. Okay.
Sure.
So we talked about Apple and this legacy contact stuff. One of the things that I mentioned in there is text messages. So text message data is included in legacy contact data. Let's say my death is suspicious. There could be very good evidence in text messages that points to who it is, right? But let's say my loved one who I leave my data to doesn't have a Mac. There is no way for them to get that data. You
Even if
can go to
they're
iCloud.com and you can get
right.
access to so much, but not messages.
Okay. So I'm
You
an
need to
Android user.
literally go out and buy a Mac.
All
See
right.
what I
I'm running
mean?
through
It's
this.
like, have we
I'm
really
running through
thought
this
this through,
scenario.
Apple? Really?
I'm an Android user.
Uh-huh.
My husband has an Apple, has an
Mhm.
iPhone. He also uses a Mac. So are you saying that if he passes, that I would have a challenge getting into access, even knowing I'm in his legacy contacts?
This is why it's critical that you also have their device passcode.
But if he died in a car
But if you
crash
died in
and
a car
phone
crash
died,
on the device, yeah, you'd have to buy another device just to be able to get access to that data. It's insane. Or you need to borrow someone else's Mac, create a new user. That would be the other option. But I mean, it's it's complicated stuff.
so do for your own purpose. And remember, we had the conversation. You're pretty solid in the plan that you and your spouse have, right? So you and your husband, you guys have. Do you have everything written like a physical and digital system to make
Yes.
sure that okay.
Yeah. We have a physical firebox, and so we have it on the calendar so that every 6 months. Now, here's another interesting thing in the Apple ecosystem. There is this back channel called Family Shared Passwords, where you can share certain passwords. But the funny thing is that Apple doesn't give you the ability to export that data. So if you think, oh, it's okay, I've got mom and dad's passwords through that back channel. Yeah, but you still can't really separate it out and print it and make it accessible for a new user. So it's a very sticky situation that they've kind of created themselves. But this is the thing, like there's so many different ecosystems that we live in. You've got the Android ecosystem, there's the Windows ecosystem, there's the Apple ecosystem, and getting all of this, getting kind of the rules set for this constantly evolving world is really, really complicated. And I just feel like a lot of the people who were in charge of this stuff didn't really think things through. And as a result, it's up to you and I to and like, oh, yeah, sure, the average person can handle this. It's complex stuff. I'm here to tell you, but this is why I'm good at my job. So,
Yeah, well, listen, and that with such respect. And I try to tell people that I talk to estate attorneys. And with these estate attorneys, they're very focused on the will, the trust, and then I'll speak to the wealth managers. And again, they're about the beneficiaries to make sure the accounts are set up. And when I start talking about passwords, they're just glazed over. Th- And I just looked at them like, so I'm going to assume that this is like an emerging, not just an issue, but an opportunity as well for us to be on top of
Yeah.
the conversation. One thing that within the My Final Playbook system that we talk about, and I wanted to get your opinion, is I've come up with, and just like we have a medical advance directive, I worked with my brother who is an estate attorney. He and I worked on a digital legacy advance directive. Now, is that something you can see value in for your clients?
A digital what?
So instead of are you familiar with the medical advance directive? Yes. Basically says medical advance directive, I'm giving someone power of attorney, my
Power of attorney. Yes. Okay.
power of
Yes.
attorney to say that if I'm in a vegetative state, that they as my medical proxy has the power to make that final decision whether
Right.
I
Right.
you flip the switch or not. Okay. So on a digital legacy advance directive, that is basically saying, I have the right to shut down because this person is now incapacitated. I
Yeah.
have the right to shut down all of their social media accounts, their subscription accounts, recurring subscriptions, and so forth. Your thoughts on that?
It's a really great thing you brought up. There's certain amounts that you can do with like the parental controls feature. So let's say you're dealing with a parent who develops Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that.
The re-
So that is where the parental controls feature can be useful. And I think really does ultimately give the closest to what you were just kind of describing. So it can give that extra level of access for those types of special situations. But is it easy for the average person to set up? No. It involves a little bit of digging. You have to kind of go through the back channel. You have to have an administrator to help set up that account. And it's a process, especially if the account was kind of already set up as a co-administrator. But, I think it could be a really great topic for one of my future videos. So
oh,
you might have stumbled onto something, Nikki.
well, listen, I just think in this digital age that we're in, it's complicated, whether you're
It is.
alive or not.
Yeah.
I know, one of my clients, they had a teenager who unalived himself. And it wasn't till afterwards, because they did not know about digital legacy contacts, that they realized, as you mentioned, that the family, underage child, parents paid for the phone, and they did not have legal rights to get into that phone.
And that's why you then need a court order to be able to access that data. And even with that, there's not a guarantee. So it's complex stuff, but it's important for everyone to have a plan. And, the most important password is that device passcode. That really is critical. A lot of other passwords can be reset, but that's a really important one. Another one I would just say is critical is obviously the email password, because a lot of times if the parent who passed away had a lot of bad passwords that were stored, in the process of getting into that account, you're going to be ultimately sent a lot of recovery emails. And so it's just really nice to have that set up so that it's easily accessible. Another
So,
thing I would
yeah.
just share for anyone who's kind of going through this, you may need to, I can understand that on your phone, you can only handle so many emails, and it can be kind of, there might be times where you might need access to mom and dad's email account. And that's where having in the settings the ability to enable or disable the account is really useful. So it hides it when you don't need it. But it's like, oh, stupid password reset. I need to get into that account. You just go into settings and you re-enable it. And boom, it comes back to life. It goes and it checks and it pulls down the most recent emails.
Well, I would think just those two pieces right there, right? The recovery and then also the digital legacy contacts. The fact that I have spoken to so many people that had no idea that that functionality even exists.
Hmm.
Why wouldn't that be part of the setup of a new phone?
Hmm.
Any
It should be. It really should be. When you get a new iPhone, that should be one of the things that it says, even if it's just like, hey, let's just verify that your old legacy contact is not like now your ex who's trying to kill you. Like, how about that? That's a handy. Is that a notification that you would allow? Yes. Right.
oh,
I don't mind spending a couple extra
all right.
seconds verifying that, especially like getting a new device, something we all kind of regularly do. It's a good time to check that stuff. and make sure that it's still who you want to have access.
So talk about healthy updates and then like the sanitizing your list, right? You said twice a year. And so talk to me a little bit about what is a good, healthy process of going through my digital life. And because I think that this is a new step in our day to day activity, is that what's interesting how in the last 5 to 10 years that we've kind of just, oh, I'll just keep signing up for all this stuff. And now subscriptions are the new, hey, just subscribe. But now it's gotten to the point where I don't know what I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And if something were to happen to me, that this would be a problem, especially for myself at an online business.
Yeah.
So, best practices for our listeners.
So of course it's not easy, right? So the challenge is that you can subscribe now to many things through multiple means. For example, if you're an Apple user, you could subscribe to something through the App Store. So it's like a monthly charge that's hitting your Apple ID. Now, thankfully, no matter where it's coming from, it's all going to go to the credit cards. So the credit cards are going to be the true, revelation about
Sure.
where are those subscriptions actually coming from. But one of the nice things is that all the different Apple devices, there is now a button. I believe it's in the same area we were kind of discussing earlier. You go to settings and it's right there, subscriptions. And it shows you all the different subscriptions that are under that particular Apple ID. So that's an easy one. Any of those, boom, you can remove them. As far as everything else, Netflix, all that stuff, you really just have to go to the credit cards for that stuff. There's no, I mean, there are services out there that will scan your account, try to figure out who you're subscribed to. Um,
Your thoughts
there's,
on that one? Because I've got a couple written down.
I feel like my opinion of that is different for someone who's dead compared to someone who's alive. I'm not so
Okay.
worried about the data leakage of someone who's dead compared to someone who's alive. So I'd be okay with using one of those services that try to figure out who you're subscribed to, but I think the credit cards are probably just the easier way to go, and then just see where that pairs. As far as how to remember to get the password data, this is where I got to be careful with my devices. I got to cover the microphones on all of them. This is where SIRI can be very useful. So what I just do is I just say, hey, you know who,
Mhm.
remind me and it's up to you, quarter, 4 months, 6 months, whatever you want to do, to send my loved one my updated CSV file of my
Wow.
passwords.
To
So
automate that
it's
whole
just
thing.
a great way to just do that. I mean, yeah, those kinds of reminders are really, really handy, I find.
And just to close out the conversation, the future AI, how do you think that this is gonna
Oh, AI AI just supercharges everything, good and bad. And so I've been seeing the number of scams that I see people being exposed to is going way, way up. A lot of the text message scams now are really, really bad. Nikki, have you seen this one with you get a text message from someone like new number, never, and it's something completely monotonous. It's like, let's get coffee.
right?
Have you gotten these?
And those are the ones I know not to answer to.
So do you know how that scam actually works?
Go for it.
Okay. So if you're at home and you're watching, go to YouTube and search for John Oliver pig butchering. That's what that scam is actually known as.
Okay.
That's the type of scam it is. The tricky thing with this is that we get all of these messages and it's really hard to know what's real anymore. That's like one of the big challenges. So I came up with this super simple way to make it obvious. So on Apple products and on Android products, there is a feature called text replacement. And it's basically this feature where you type in a couple of keys, custom keys, and it replaces that text with something else, right? So what I did was I created a custom text replacement that says, I'm sorry, this number is not recognized, is not saved into my phone. I have recently been the victim of a phishing scam, and for security reasons, I need you to verify your identity. Thank you. And the thing is when you throw the word victim into a sentence, it instantly changes the tone. So if they tell you anything other than a legit name, and even if they say a legit name, it's still worth a phone call to make sure it's them.
Right.
Now you could argue, oh, well, David, with voice cloning tools, couldn't they? Yes, anything's possible. So security, it's an emotion, but at least it helps weed out a lot of the crap out there. But it is a really complicated world that we live in, and security issues are just getting worse and worse. And AI is just making it a lot more intense. And
I want to
I'm
find a positive note to
I
end this
totally want to end
call
on a
on.
positive note too. I just think to all of you out there who have aging parents, especially, you need to have a conversation and you need to have a way to keep them safe from some of this stuff. It's for those of us who are younger, it's our job now to protect our parents because these scammers are everywhere. It is scary to me how much of it I'm seeing. And I'm just one person. Like I don't, do tech support calls all day. But a lot of these people are getting taken for a ride. And I think it's really up to us to step up, and maybe it is time to use those parental controls feature and start to explore what access mom and dad really should have. And but it's hard to know because the thing is if your parent, if you like say you cut off access from unknown numbers, and what if their doctor changes their number or they call from a different extension? Like
That's true.
there is so many issues that are out there, and what everyone really needs is digital literacy to know how to handle this stuff. And I'm the first person to empathize and say, it's a lot. It's hard and it's overwhelming at times. And I'm sorry, I really wanted to end this on a positive note. I'm
Well, the
trying.
positive note,
I'm looking for a light at the end of the tunnel. It's complicated stuff. Yeah.
but you're not alone.
But you're not
And so the
alone.
positive note, you are not
You're not
alone. And
alone.
for our listeners to know that, look, there are David, Niki, we're here. We're here to try and figure it out together. There are resources, and every day there are new resources coming out. So, to be able to stay on top of it or to start leaning on people who can guide you through this journey. And certainly as a digital legacy thanatologist, I'm happy to do that. And David, you want to talk a little bit more where people can find your content material?
Yeah. So for 15 years, I've had a YouTube channel called Tech Talk America. You can just look for me there. Unfortunately, now autocorrect changes it to Tick Talk America. It's Tech, TECH. Or if they want to work with me one-on-one, I do still do a certain amount of private one-on-one work. I'm down to 1 day a week. But you can sign up for a session with me at techtalkamerica.com. I'm happy to work with
Awesome.
you. And I work with couples all the time or families because I understand a lot of people have a lot of questions. And obviously, as you can see, it's complicated stuff.
You're not
So
alone.
happy to help
Thank
you
you, Dave.
navigate it.
Death and dying the digital age, how to navigate through this new fourth industrial revolution. David, thank you so much. And we'll end here.
Thank you.
If you are an Apple user and you have not yet established a legacy contact, then this is going to be one of the most important tutorials that you ever watch. If you've never heard the term, a legacy contact is the person or persons you designate to inherit your iCloud data after your death. Most importantly, this is all about your photos. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire setup process, and I'm also going to answer the top 5 questions that people tend to have about this subject. That's coming up next on Tech Talk America. Hey folks, and welcome to the class. The information in this video is so important that I really don't want to waste any time on an intro. Let's dive in. You can establish a legacy contact from your iPhone, iPad, or Mac, but personally, I think it's easiest to do this on your iPhone. By the way, this is the perfect thing to do with your family while you're gathered this holiday season. For starters, I want you to go into Settings and then tap on your name at the top. If you're on iOS 16, you're going to tap on Privacy and Security. If you're on iOS 17, it's technically Sign In and Security. Now, tap on Legacy Contact here at the bottom, and then navigate to the contact that you would like to designate as your legacy contact. If you're in a family plan with this other person, it'll probably suggest them, but otherwise, you can just navigate to their contact card and then tap on their phone number. At this point, you'll need to tap on continue. And if the person that you are designating as your legacy contact is an iPhone user, you'll be able to send authorization through a text message, or you can print out a code. If the person that you're designating is an Android user, the only option that you'll have is to print out a code, which, by the way, you could just as easily attach as a PDF and send them in an email. You don't have to actually give it to them in person. If the person that you're designating as a legacy contact is an iPhone owner, I would like to make a recommendation that you ultimately send them access through both text message and the printout option. Start by sending authorization through a text, but when it's done, come back to this part of your iPhone and then also go to the option to print out a code. All right, at this point, let me answer the most common questions people tend to have about legacy contacts. Question number 1, can my legacy contact get access to my files before I die? I feel like this is kind of an obvious one, but no, they can't. Question number 2, how does your loved one actually gain access once the time comes? They will first need to go to digital-legacy.apple.com, where they will need to upload the death certificate and also prove that they own the Apple ID that is listed as the legacy contact. Question number 3, what if your loved one passes away and did not mark you as a legacy contact? Technically, it is possible to gain access, but it does require a court order. Hence the importance to do this now. Question number 4, what is the maximum number of legacy contacts that one person can have? The answer is 5. And finally, question number 5, what data is included and what data is excluded from legacy contacts? What is included is everything that lives inside of iCloud Drive, including messages, documents, photos, contacts, calendars. What is not included is password data stored inside of keychain, digital purchases like music, movies, and apps, and also any payment methods that were tied to that account. Now, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I have to say, this is one area where I have to say I disagree with how Apple handles this. As someone who does a lot of tech support for the public, I realize there is a legitimate need to having access to a loved one's keychain data. And without that information, the loved one has to manually reset every single password to every single account. There is a way to get around this, but I save that information for my paying clients. If you would like to book a session with me, you can do so on my website at techtalkamerica.com.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.